Michael, can you deal with Coetzee and Summertime?
This is the story of an English biographer who is researching the life of a dead, celebrated South African novelist by interviewing people who were significant in the man's life. And the complication comes in the fact that the dead novelist is John Coetzee. So what we had to look at was, is this fiction or is it autobiography? In fact, it's a conflation of both, but we decided it's fiction because it uses the forms of fiction. It's based largely in dialogue, there's imaginative projection, there's narrative in there, and above all, it's not just the story of John Coetzee, it's also the story of these people that are tangential in his life, a former lover, a cousin, a would-be lover, a former colleague. What is most remarkable about this book is the unbelievably self-flagellatory picture that Coetzee paints of himself. I mean, it's very, very painful to read in many places. He describes himself, or through the mouths of others, as a man without sort of human qualities, unsuitable for human interaction. A lover describes him as somebody who loves by numbers. He's called a frog, not a prince. I mean, it's really quite distressing stuff at times, but it's also done with a degree of formal perfection, very musical perfection in many ways, and in pitch perfect prose. And I think we all came away from reading this book wishing we could write like J.M. Coetzee, but profoundly grateful that we're not J.M. Coetzee.
Extremely good way of putting it. John Mullen, you're going to talk about Sarah Waters' A Little Strange.
Yes. I probably have to be a bit careful because, like an author that Sarah Waters evidently much admires, Wilkie Collins, you probably know he used to put a warning at the beginning of his novels asking reviewers not to paraphrase too closely what happened in the novel because they would spoil the pleasure of uncertainty for the readers. And this is a mystery story of a kind. So I can't, if you haven't read it, I shouldn't spoil it for you because it is one of those books where you want to find out what the solution is. It's a kind of mystery story or a kind of ghost story, but it also blends that with, in a rather unlikely and brilliant way, with an extraordinarily attentive social realism. It's set in the 1940s, in the period immediately after the Second World War. It's narrated by a middle-aged GP in Warwickshire. Trust me, I'm a doctor. There's a kind of, I sort of imagine Sarah Waters being amused by the idea of choosing a doctor as a narrator because it's an extraordinarily gripping story, and the gripping thing about it is that as the narration unfolds, you notice two incompatible things, I think, about the storytelling. One, the extraordinary sort of accuracy of observation of this narrator, and on the other hand, alongside it, odd quirks and kinds of unreliability about how he's telling the story. So I've seen in reviews the novel praised for its historical sense, its audacious mixing of literary genres, and Sarah Waters is a fantastically skilled literary pasticheuse, is that the word? But actually, the extraordinary thing about it is the narration, the grip of that. I think that people have talked about their experience of, sort of reading this book as part of a great long list of novels. I think this book, when I read it, there were long stretches when I actually forgot that I was doing the Man Booker. I was so absorbed in it and trying to reconcile those two contradictory aspects of it, of the storytelling, the accuracy and the weirdness of the narrator. I can't be more specific than that without rather spoiling it.
That was lovely, John. One more to go, and it is Hilary Mantel and Wolf Hall, which, as many of you will know, is a story about Thomas Cromwell in the court of Henry VIII in the 1520s novel, which is absolutely gripping in the way that John has described The Little Stranger as being. A huge, bold novel with a fantastic historical sweep. You can hear the rustle of sort of Wolsey's gown in some darkened room at Westminster. You can see the flicker of the sort of cardinal's eye as some errand is set in train that will have some significance in the King's court. You get a sense of Henry himself. She handles the arrival of characters who are judged perfectly in the sense that they sort of sidle onto the stage quietly, then they begin to make the mark, and you watch them flourish and grow through the book, which helps to give you that sense of really being there, of living in a world where you feel its pulse and its rhythms, its characters, the smell of London. And I think one of the extraordinary things about it, at a ground floor level in a way, leaving aside the vast architecture of the book, which is extraordinarily impressive, is the way that, first of all, those of us who have an instinctive dislike of the historic present tense, I think there's more than one of us in this group who has, she manages to get away with it with ease. I mean, she deals with that, she tells it in a particular way which becomes gripping. The second thing, which I think more than one of us commented on, is that there's a terrible danger in a book like this that you'll fall into, to pick up John's word, pastiche of some imagined 16th century way of talking and words and curious formal ways of addressing cardinals, kings, and their satraps around the various watering holes and royal residences of London. And she manages to create a world in which there doesn't seem to be anything fake about it at all. I mean, she inhabits it, she explains it, she watches it moving. It's rather like one of these sort of Renaissance orreries where all the planets and so on are on brass whatnots. When you wind it up, it all moves perfectly, it all ends up in the right place. It's an extraordinary book, and the bravery with which she gives it its title, and then just gradually lets you know in the course of whatever it is, 550 pages, where the significance of this will lie, and what lies ahead, I think is masterly. So that book, I think, really picks up the theme that you will have gathered we all feel with this shortlist, and I think we feel it very strongly, which is that each of these books is a tour de force in its own way. They're quite different. If you compare, for example, the Quentin Mays to the Sarah Waters, I mean, they're quite different kinds of books. But what they all do is to create an absolutely convincing fictional world. And I think we've found it a very moving experience to come down to this point, although it did involve, you know, some tricky decisions towards the end. Of course it did. I mean, it's horrible to say goodbye, as employers now say, to books that you will want to read again. I think what I can say finally, just winding up and asking a few questions, is that it is absolutely true when we finished the shortlist meeting that we all confessed to each other that we were actually looking forward to going back and reading these yet again. Now, you couldn't really ask for more. And certainly speaking for myself, and I think it's true of the others as well, I do not know which of these books is going to win the Man Booker Prize. It's worth telling you that that judgment will be made on the afternoon of the prize giving dinner, which is Tuesday, the 6th of October. Well, there you are. We think it's a feast.